Right now, most people believe, among this young mental analytical processing group in our high schools and colleges, that science and faith are incompatible. They do. They believe that. You ask them, well, why do you believe that? Well, Hawking said, we don't need God. Or, gosh, Dawkins is saying, that everything in science points away from God. Notice they're all arguments from authority based on new atheism. Oh, by the way, Galileo. The church getting scapegoated for Galileo, which, we treat definitely in our secondary ed courses. But the key thing is, it's a huge issue. Galileo got persecuted by the church. This is a total simplification of everything that took place there, because the church was never anti-science. Goodness knows that Copernicus came up with the first heliocentric view of the universe, and he was a Catholic cleric. The Jesuits at the Roman College were busy taking and proving mathematically the heliocentric system and gave it as a gift to Galileo. I mean, what are you talking about? What church are you talking about? It's a scapegoated church. But the question has to be clarified. So what can we do? What can we do? Find a resource that talks about 3 kinds of evidence. That's the first thing we can do. Well, what kind of evidence? First thing, I know this is going to sound esoteric. Please don't get turned off by it. Space-time geometry proofs. I know that sounds weird, but yes, space-time in what's called general theory of relativity of Einstein is a dynamic field, but it always has certain properties. Properties that extend to multiverses, right? Multiverse is a completely theoretical entity, right? It's like a big mega universe in which little bubble universes are coughing out all the time. But the multiverse is one way that people are trying to get out of a creation at the Big Bang. They say, well, there can be a pre-Big Bang period. And the pre-Big Bang period could come in 2 forms. It could be a multiverse, right? This big mega universe with lots of bubble universes burping out of it. And our universe is but one bubble universe amidst the many. And therefore, they say that the multiverse could extend infinitely back into time. But in point of fact, as we'll see in a moment with the space-time geometry proof, you can nail that one. Also, string theory. Every kid's heard about string theory and higher dimensional space in string theory. And you could even have universes being produced on every single bounce, right? By 2, 3-dimensional membranes colliding together in a 4-dimensional bulk space-time in the higher dimensional space of string theory. And you go, okay, maybe there could be a pre-Big Bang universe because of string theory, but does that need a beginning? And the answer is yes. So what do we want to give to our kids? We don't want to just say, oh, don't believe in a multiverse, it's never been proved. You know what happens with every analytical processor the minute you say that? There's no evidence for it, therefore don't believe it. They'll believe it. They will. They want evidence. So just say, okay, let's suppose there is a multiverse. Let's suppose there is a string theoretical bouncing universe in higher dimensional space. Let's suppose there is. It doesn't matter. Because by the space-time geometry proofs put together by Alexander Vilenkin and Arvind Borda in 1993, even a multiverse, certainly our universe, a multiverse, bouncing universes in higher dimensions need a beginning. But that proof had 5 conditions in it. And one of those conditions, the third condition, had a possible, though very, 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 very remote possibility of being, providing a loophole, to the proof. So in 1997, because of that loophole, a lot of people thought, oh, okay, we got out of that proof. We really don't need a beginning of every universe or multiverse. The weak energy condition might protect us. But then this guy, Alan Guth, who was over at MIT, right, he comes along and he actually does a modeling of all these inflationary model universes in 1999. And he comes to the astounding conclusion that try as physicists might to produce a single model of an inflationary universe, parenthetical, or multiverse, that does not have a beginning, They have not been able to do so. All such models are eternal into the future, but not into the past. They must all have a beginning. Now, all we got to do is start presenting. You'd be surprised. In this program we have called the Reason Series, What Science Says About God, this is all explained. It's all documented in peer-reviewed journals of physics. Of course, science can't come to an absolute and perfect judgment. Science can always change because science always has to be open to further discovery. This is all set out in the curriculum for them. But these space-time geometry proofs are the nearest thing to a proof you're going to get, for a beginning of the universe from the whole area of physics, and they are now dynamically available. Indeed, as it turns out, in 2003, all three of those physicists got together. Arvind Borda, Alexander Vilenkin, and Alan Guth. And it's called, not surprisingly, the Borda-Vilenkin and Guth theorem. Or the Borda-Vilenkin and Guth proof, or the Bvg proof. Okay. What is the Bvg proof? It has only one single condition, everyone. Not 5 conditions, or an exception can be found. But one single condition which applies to every multiverse necessarily, applies to every bouncing universe, even in higher dimensional space and string theory. And it is completely independent of the physics of any universe or multiverse. It has only one condition, what's called the average Hubble expansion, be greater than 0. What does that mean? A Hubble expansion is the rate of the expansion of the universe or multiverse as a whole. Okay? So, remember, when you're dealing with the expansion of the universe, it's not that, things are moving away from each other, like galaxy is moving away from galaxy. It's actually that space is expanding and stretching like a balloon that's being blown up. Extra space, right? So is coming from the stretching of the space-time continuum itself, and all of the galactic systems and galaxies in the space-time continuum are being pulled apart, not because they're moving away from each other in locomotion, they're being pulled apart by all the space that's getting added to it. Now, what does that all mean? What that means is you can make a really accurate prediction. By the way, we know the expansion rate of our universe, and we can tell you right now for a fact every multiverse has to have an average Hubble expansion greater than 0. Every single one of them. Now you say to yourself, well, what does that mean? It means, and we explain this very definitively in the curriculum, don't get scared by it, every single universe or multiverse in an inflationary or having an average rate of expansion greater than 0, no matter how small, every bouncing universe with string theory, which has an average Hubble expansion greater than 0, no matter how small, every single one of them must have a beginning. This proof is so elegant, even non-physics students can understand it. Now, what's my point? Our kids need to know this fact, because if they do, they will see that the likelihood of a beginning, and I don't talk about absolute certitude in science, but that the probability, the likelihood of a beginning is very, 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 let's just say probable. Okay? So we have an extreme likelihood of a beginning of every single system. Our universe, any multiverse in which it could be contained, any bouncing universe in higher dimensional space, etc. Everyone has to have a beginning. And you know what the consequences of the beginning are that Dr. Kraft already mentioned. The first, of course, remember, in physics, a beginning is a point at which the universe comes into existence as a whole. Number 2, the universe coming into existence as a whole includes its physical time. So physical time and the universe are coming into existence at a particular, shall we say, point. Prior to that point, what was the physical universe and physical time? Nothing. And we know one thing about nothing, Stephen Hawking notwithstanding, as my little debate with him on the Larry King show indicated. Nothing is nothing, everyone. There's no such thing as nothing. Nothing is just nothing. And we know one thing about nothing besides the fact that it's nothing. Nothing can only do nothing. Thank you. Because it's nothing. Thank you. That's exactly right. Now, if that's the case, then when the universe and its physical time, when they were nothing, they could not have moved themselves from nothing to something because they could only do nothing. Therefore, something else, which is transcendent, right? That means outside of our universe, right? Something else which is beyond our universe has to actually move our physical universe with its physical time from nothing to something. And that something else we commonly know as God or a creator. Is this a frightening thought to some scientists? Absolutely. In fact, it's such a frightening thought that Stephen forgot to mention the Bvg and Guth theorem in his new book, The Grand Design. In fact, he forgot to mention, as a space-time theorist, he forgot to mention all the space-time geometry proofs altogether. Wow, that is really a culpable error of omission, it seems to me. How could he not know about these things? Oh, I think he did. I just think he just forgot them or something, left them out. Well, anyway, Alexander Vilenkin, who was one, right, he's the V in the Bvg and Guth theorem. He's the director of the Institute of Cosmology at Tufts University. He's one of the top theoretical physicists in the country. He kind of went to Stephen's, 70th birthday party at the beginning of this year. And if, when physicists have big birthday parties, they read papers to each other. And of course, the papers were on the state of the cosmos. And Alexander Vilenkin read his paper, which was basically on why physicists cannot avoid a creation. And he went through the whole Bvg theorem. He went through all of the evidence from entropy. He even showed why you couldn't have an endless universe in stasis, etc. Every single one of these things was proven with a proof. And at the end of it, he said, look, of course things can change in science if discoveries are made. But this proof is independent of the physics of a universe or a multiverse. It's an extraordinarily elegant and simple proof with almost universal applicability. He says the best science can do right now is to show that our universe had a beginning. Of course, a beginning, as Stephen very well knows and acknowledged at Cambridge, does imply a creation. What's the point? Our kids deserve to know. They shouldn't have to read Physical Review Journal, because they won't. They shouldn't have to read the Journal of Physics, because they won't. Well, most won't. And they shouldn't have to stumble upon, oh, by the way, Lisa Grossman, who is the New York Times science editor, was covering the story for the New Scientist. And here was the title of her article on Alexander Vilenkin's paper. Why physicists can't avoid a creation, the worst birthday present ever. Okay. But here's all said, do our kids have yes. Can it be made known to them? Yes. Is it possible for us in a simple series like the Reason series to convey this in a way, and to memorialize it for them in a way that they can tell to their friends and defend their faith scientifically? Yes. Number two, entropy. I'm not going to go into it in detail, but I just want to let you know that with respect to entropy, the second law of thermodynamics, all energetic systems in a closed system will move from a state of order to a state of disorder, and it's going to happen irreversibly, right? Over the course of time, as work is done, you're going to have a movement from order to disorder. Okay, you have a huge amount of order in our universe today. And I'm just going to go through this. But the key thought, of course, is if the universe had been around for an infinite amount of time, what should it be in, today? What state? Complete state of disorder. That is to say, random microwave background radiation, which is good for nothing and can't do anything except exert pressure to continue the universe in its outward expansion. That's it. But we have all kinds of things in our universe besides microwave background radiation, like stars and planets and physicists. Something's amiss. Probably means that the universe hasn't been around for an infinite amount of time, and certainly probably means, too, it hasn't even been around for a single bounce. Probably invalidates the bouncing universe theory along with dark energy, but I'm not going to get into that today because I'm running out of time. The key thought, of course, is, do our kids have a right to know? Yes, they have a right to know. They have a right to know space-time geometry proofs and why it indicates a beginning. They have a right to know the evidence for entropy. They have a right to know all the anthropic coincidences. Absolutely. Those anthropic coincidences are so important to seeing the intelligence of God, not just the creative power of God, but the intelligence, the mind of God. You can actually get right to it almost. And I just leave you just two quick thoughts. For example, we have 20 of these universal constants, which are numbers which control all of the equations of physics and describe all of the laws of nature in our universe. These 20 constants have very specific numbers. They had them at the Big Bang. They have them today. Here's the deal. If those numbers were off ever so slightly higher or lower, I kid you not, ever so slightly higher or lower, the universe simply could not have sustained any life form whatsoever. The odds against this happening are so tremendous, even Stephen admits that without a multiverse, this cannot proceed. I mean, honestly, if our gravitational force or our weak force constant, gravitational force constant, weak force constant, two constants, were off by 1 part in 10 to the 50, that's a decimal point, 49 zeros and a 1, really small fraction, higher or lower, then either the universe would have exploded continuously in its expansion, or the universe would have collapsed into a black hole. And both are very bad for life forms. And I could give you a whole lot of other examples of all of this. And of course, we do in our high school curriculum, the Reason series, because our kids have a right to know the evidence, the whole story, not just the story that is presented by the popular media. Although I must say, PBS asked me to do a multi-part series with them called Closer to the Truth, where they are now taking the religious perspective seriously because people like Valenkin and Guth are so actively saying, hey, you can't just keep this up and omit huge chunks of evidence. But what's my point? I think we need to go through the entire list. The first thing we need to do is give these kids the evidence for God from physics. It's not hard. There are faculty resource manuals. Even for our curriculum, the Reason series, we provide an online forum where the poor confirmation teacher, homeschooling mom, or even the religion teacher in a Catholic high school doesn't have to know any physics. They can get the answers to the kids' questions right on the forum. We give them a password. It's a closed forum for any of the kids in any school across the country to get onto it. And they can get the answer to their questions. And that is fantastic because, of course, it takes the onus off that poor religion teacher. But what's my point? My point is we got to present it. We can't avoid it because we fear it, because our kids are already being swayed and influenced by it. Number 2 question, this is a whole other lecture. I'm not going to get into it, but I just want to say, for the sake of apologetics right now, the suffering question is a doozy. Our kids take it exceedingly seriously. The one thing I just want to give you is a resource to give to the teachers. We haven't done our curriculum yet on suffering. That is coming up at the Magis Institute. But right now, just go to this website, Magis, M-A-G-I-S. It's like magisterium, except drop the terium. And it just Magis, which means the more. Magis, M-A-G-I-S, reasonfaith.org. Magis, reasonfaith.org. Now, when you get there, you'll notice about, then store, then encyclopedias. Go to encyclopedias. There's a whole encyclopedia on God and a whole encyclopedia on science, on Christ, on Jesus. Historical apologetics for Jesus. Go to the God Encyclopedia and go to the last 2 sections of the God Encyclopedia. You'll get just a huge answer where you, as a high school teacher or a mom or whatever, or dad, can actually glean from that the answers to the questions that need to be given to your children. It has to be examined. Why is there evil caused and suffering caused by human beings? Why is there evil and suffering caused by nature? You need to do both of those things. If you give them an adequate answer, it ceases to be a problem. Third, we do have to get to the historicity of Jesus. There's so much evidence out there. The difficulty is when John P. Meyer writes a book, he cannot write it in less than 1,000 pages with 5,000 footnotes. When N.T. Wright writes a book, he can't write it in less than 1,000 pages with 5,000 footnotes. And all the Aramaic and all the Greek and people just dive for the covers unless you're, a seminarian interested in studying Scripture. We just did you a favor. Go to that same encyclopedia. I summarized all those books. The Jeremias books on the historicity of the Eucharist, the N.T. Wright's book on the historicity of the resurrection, 30-page article each. Took 1,000 pages, condensed into 30-page, footnoted it. It's there. It's there for the kids. The key thing is we need to exhort our teachers. Please read this. Please come on to our seminars on the phone. Please do something, but don't ignore apologetics. Take a look at Father Barron's Catholicism series. Absolutely essential. Dr. Kreef's books, especially on Catholicism and especially on faith and reason, especially on objective morality and virtue. I think all these things are just incredible resources, but we just have to go through a reintegration and a reinvention of ourselves.